All right. Hello there. Actually, hang on, let me close out of this. Hello there. Um, as you can see, our production quality has improved. I'm now talking to you through a webcam. I have the same shitty microphone. I'm working on that. I should have a new one tomorrow. Um, I'm on a new fancy computer that can run Streamlabs OBS, so that is what I'm on now. So now you get to look at my ugly mug as I rant at you unedited about stuff you probably don't care that much about. All right. Um, yeah, so it's been a good little while since my last upload, which I apologize for. I think YouTube Studio said it was like 17 days since I last uploaded. Yeah. The reason for that is kind of twofold. One is I haven't been terribly motivated lately. My depression's gotten a little bad lately. And on top of that, it's been largely uneventful in the world of politics as far as things I want to talk about, you know? Um, Even the last video I did, the one about police brutality in Kentucky, that was a suggestion from somebody. That wasn't something I came up with on my own, because politics under Democrats is just kind of boring. I don't know. Like a ship got stuck in a canal. That was a thing that happened for a few days this last week. Uh, I got my second COVID shot. How you guys doing? No, but real talk. So this idea for this video came earlier today. I was job hunting, of all things. I can't remember if I've mentioned or not on this channel that I really, really hate my job. My job is terrible. So I was looking for a new job earlier and putting in applications at places. And, I thought to myself, I'm a little curious. What worker co-ops are in my area? Because, it's something I advocate for a lot as a socialist. And it's something I just wanted to see, if there are any in my area. Turns out they're not. The nearest one is in, I don't remember the name of the town, but it's like 2 hours away from me. So that's a non-option. Way out in the middle of rural Kentucky. But as I was kind of doing my research on that, I realized, hey, I haven't done a lot of research on exactly what worker co-ops are, how they function, how effective they are, and like I know that they are effective, right? I know that they work, but I don't know to what extent they work, and I don't know how best to advocate for them over a traditionally held capitalist firm. So I decided I was going to do a little research, and I found this article, which I really like, and we're going to go through it together. This is kind of going to be a general, worker co-op 101 video, I guess. All right, so let's get started. The first thing, let's pull up our lovely MS Paint here. What is a worker co-op? I really wish I still had my touch screen from my laptop. That's unfortunate. All right, so here we have, I'm going to demonstrate the difference, all right, between a traditionally held firm, and we will denote this as capitalism. All right, that is a traditionally held firm. This is going to represent pretty much every company you work for in America today, right? All right, draw a little line in the middle, and here we have worker cooperative. I'm on a new keyboard, so my typing is not good right now. Which we will call loosely, because socialism is a little bit more than just worker cooperatives, but it's certainly a big part of it. Worker cooperative, which represents certainly more socialism than we have. So, let's start with a traditionally held firm, okay? Let's start with what we know about traditionally held firms, about how capital works, all right? Let's say this here. This is Bob, right? I'm not going to write all of their names. This is Bob. Bob has an idea. Bob wants to make dog collars. Bob wants to make little collars. He has a bunch of dogs. He wants to make collars for them, and he wants to sell them to other dog owners for a profit. All right. Bob starts his own dog collar business, right? Bob sells his dog collars, starts making some money, right? Eventually, Bob's dog collar business explodes, right? It takes off. And there is so much demand for his collars that he doesn't have the manpower to reasonably make all of these dog collars himself. So, what Bob is going to do is Bob is going to hire an employee whom we will call Jim. This is Jim. Say hi to Jim. Jim is an employee of Bob. Let's do text. Let's make this smaller. Jim is employed by Bob. All right? What this means is Jim assists Bob in the creation of dog collars. Right? In exchange, Bob gives Jim some money. It's some amount of money, right? This amount of money is less than Bob is going to make because Bob is the owner of the firm of Bob's Dog Collars or whatever. Bob invested the starting capital. Bob used his own funds, his own resources to create this business. And therefore, by the rules of capitalism, Bob is entitled to make that money and pay Jim whatever Bob decides Jim is owed for his work. Now, the unfortunate part of this, I mean, at its face value, this is how capitalism works. It's on a micro scale. It gets far more complex than this. But let me ask something, okay? What agency does Jim have in this situation? As far as, okay, let's say that along with Jim, Bob hires 4 other people, right? We'll call them Fred, Stan, and Mark, all right? Fred, Stan, Mark, and Jim all have wages. Bob is paying all of them a portion of the profits from his dog collars. So, my next question is, what agency does Jim have in this scenario? What influence does Jim exert over the creation of these dog collars? Let's say that Bob decides, hey, I would like to put in all of our future dog collars, I would like to put a little, let's say a little spike right here in the collar. It's a little spike. It's going to dig into the back of the dog's neck. It's going to make it really uncomfortable. And Jim, being the good person who likes dogs that he is, says, hey, I don't really like that. I don't like that you're making a worse product. And I think that's wrong. I think we should not do that. And Bob doesn't care, right? And let's say that Fred, Stan, and Mark all agree with Bob, you know? They're all horrible people, except for Jim. Jim's a good guy. What agency does Jim have here? Because the logical answer for Bob, if Bob wants to continue making his spiked dog collars, is, okay, well, screw you. You're no longer employed by me. Go away. I'm going to make my dog collars. I don't need you. I have 3 perfectly good workers. I'll find a 4th that is willing to make these dog collars. And Jim is out of job. Jim's out of job, and he had no influence over the creation of any... He had no influence over the direction the company took, right? Additionally, what investment does Jim have in the success of this company? he doesn't have any, right? Because the success of the company, not only does it not affect Jim because he's making the same amount of money no matter how much money Mark ends up making, or Bob. He's making the same amount of money. The success of the company doesn't affect him in any meaningful way. So what investment does Jim have in the success of the company? And the answer is that he doesn't have any. He has no stock in this company doing well. He has no... he may have job security, but beyond that, he doesn't have... he clearly isn't making any more money. He doesn't have an influence on the direction the company goes. So Jim is kind of just shit out of luck, right? He's not having a good time. This is capitalism. This is a traditionally held firm. This is pretty much every job you could go out there and get right now. Go to McDonald's, you get hired as a cashier. You're not going to get to all of a sudden say, hey, I don't like that the burgers are made from whatever mystery meat they're made of. You can't just do that because McDonald's doesn't care. McDonald's cares about maximizing their profits above all else, right? So this sucks, right? This is not good. I upset my dog by shifting in my chair. He's all the way downstairs. Let me propose an alternative to this system, okay? Let's say we got Bob, right? We got Bob. It's our friend Bob. He's going to start making his dog collars. Look at that. Look, it's exactly the same situation, right? Bob, as he is making his dog collars, he's like, hey, this could be a pretty profitable venture, right? Why don't I start selling my dog collars for a little money, right? Invest in the process and start making some money, right? Let me propose an alternative to what happened over here. Let's say Bob calls Jim over, right? Bob calls Jim, and Bob says, hey, man, my phone just went off. Hey, man, I've got this decently profitable dog collar business right now. You want to come help me make some dog collars and make some good money? I'm making pretty good money here. We could go halvesies on this, right? And Jim's like, hell yeah, dude, I want to go halvesies on that. So Jim shows up, and Jim starts making dog collars as well. Look at that. Dog collars. It's great. And they're making so much money. They're making the same amount of money. Let me get rid of this. And hey, Fred and Stan and Mark, you guys want in on this too? Hell yeah, we want in on this. Let's make some dog collars. Let's make some money, you know? Everyone shows up. Everyone starts making these dog collars, and they're incredible dog collars. I mean, they were good dog collars here, and until the little spike got added. All right. So already we're at a much more a much more equitable scenario here, right? Bob is himself making less money. This is true, but in exchange, Jim, Fred, Stan, and Mark are all making more money. They're all making an equal share of the company's profits because they're all... This is no longer just Mark's company. By bringing on Jim and Fred and Stan and Mark, it became Bob and Jim and Fred and Stan and Mark's dog collars. They are all co-owners of this company, right? And as a result, they all have a say in how the company is run. They all split the profits amongst themselves. All right, let's say Bob, our friend Bob here, he's such a terrible dog person. He shows up to work one day and he says, hey guys, check out this prototype I built. It's a collar, but it's got this little spike in it, and it's gonna mess with a lot of dogs. It's gonna be real funny because he's a horrible person. And everyone there, Jim and Mark and Fred and Stan, I can't keep their names straight, but they all are like, dude, that's kind of fucked. Why would you do that? No, we don't like that. So they say, no, that's bullshit. We're not doing that. And Bob, who started the business, but is a partial owner of the company alongside the rest of his friends here, doesn't get to make his spiked collars. And saves a lot of dogs, a lot of discomfort, you know? It's the beauty of workplace democracy. And maybe I'm doing a really bad job of explaining this, but what I'm trying to get around to here is a worker cooperative is a means of ownership of a company in which, instead of one person owning the company and employing a bunch of other people who then get paid by the owner, everyone is an owner of the company. Everyone's a partial owner of the company. They own partial stock in the company. They get a say in who takes on what role. They get an equal share of the profits, or if not an equal share of the profits, then one that is agreed upon by all parties. And yeah, that's it. Functionally, they're making the same number of dog collars. There's still the 5 of them. They're making the same number of dog collars, making the same amount of money, right? Between them, they're making the same amount of money. And now Bob isn't able to make his $4 signs to Jim's like little shitty $half-a-dollar sign. Instead, everyone makes a dollar sign, right? Everyone gets enough money, right? Everyone gets a bunch of money. I'm gonna leave those there actually. Well, damn, Taylor, you might say to me, because that's my name. This sounds pretty awesome. Why don't all companies do this, right? Like, why am I working for minimum wage at McDonald's? Why am I working 40 hours a week, 2 different jobs at minimum wage, and not making any money to live on, and my boss and his boss and his boss and his boss are making 6, 7, 8 figures? The reason is because capitalism. Capitalism doesn't like socialism, because socialism is a solution to the problems presented by capitalism. And so we bring that is a baseline understanding of what a worker cooperative is. So then we get to this. This is an article that I discovered today. It's an article about the paper about worker cooperatives, why some of them succeeded while others have failed. This basically goes into more detail on the aspects of worker co-ops and what causes them to succeed and what causes them to fail. Because, as I mentioned, there really aren't many worker cooperatives out there. There's like one big one based in Spain. It's called the Mondragon Network. There's a few other examples that are used in this paper. There's some U.S. plywood co-ops. There was some Jamaican sugar worker co-ops, and the Philadelphia area O&O markets. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what an O&O market is. Yeah, excuse me. This is why editing would do me good. All right. Why are worker cooperatives desirable? Worker member control. Worker cooperatives are controlled by their members who participate in decision-making at all levels of the enterprise. Members have a say in what goods or services are provided, what quality, how, and by whom, for what pay, and at what prices. Sometimes the control is exercised through direct employee ownership of a major block of shares in the company. Worker members vote on policy decisions, elect the organization's governing board, and have a major say on day-to-day shop floor or office decisions. Kind of what we talked about before. By working at a worker cooperative, you become a partial owner, a partial stakeholder in the success of that company. You, generally, it involves, upon hiring, investing a bit of your own capital. From what I understand, I believe that's how it works. And from there, your return on that investment is predicated on the success or failure of the company for the time that you work there and are a shareholder. Limits on wage and salary inequality. This is what we talked about with the dollar signs, right? Bob gets all this money. versus everyone gets money, all right? Labor hires capital instead of the other way. See, members invest money in the firm, but control goes with membership, one member, one vote, rather than the size of any investment. So you can't you can't get hired and then say, I'm going to put $1 million down on the company, and then get more influence on the company. That's not how a proper worker co-op works. Members share the profits. Profits belong to the worker members, who may use them to expand their business, benefit themselves, or provide collective benefits such as education, daycare, healthcare, or housing to the local community. Social concerns are balanced with the pursuit of profit. This is another one that I didn't talk about a ton, but basically there is more of a concern for things like ethics and environmental impact and the quality of the goods, as opposed to just making a profit, right? Because a corporation, a capitalist corporation, at the end of the day, its one job is to make Bob as much money as Bob can get, right? With the co-op, we got to make all these people money. We got to do what's best for all these people. And I don't think all of these people are going to be benefited by putting these little spikes in their dog collars. I think that's just not going to work, because it's just not. Self-reliance, local community development. Promote the general welfare of the local communities in which they're based. Like other businesses, worker co-ops produce for export, but there is often an emphasis on local production for local and regional consumption. This is basically, a focus more on kind of the community aspect of it, and keeping things locally sourced, as opposed to a corporation where McDonald's sends meat to a restaurant, and fuck if anyone knows where it's from, right? Job creation. They try to maximize employment, maintaining jobs and creating new ones, while keeping productivity high and avoiding feather bedding and make work. Satisfying work. This is a big one, because I don't know about you, okay? Every job I've worked, when I worked for a pizza shop, when I worked for an ice cream shop, when I worked for a Staples, when I worked for a restaurant, and when I now work for a plasma center, I don't give a shit about my work. I just don't, because my profits are not based on how well I do that work. My profits are based on showing up, being there for X amount of hours, and going home, and getting paid to just be there, right? But when you have a vested interest in the work you're doing, that's inherently going to be more satisfying when you directly reap the rewards of the work that you do. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And they often rotate onerous work. Someone's got to clean the toilet. This week it's Jim, Democratic limits on managerial power. In a worker co-op, you elect your manager, and you can unelect your manager if they are a tyrant, which is also something you can't do in Bob's Paradise on the left here. Limited size, usually small or medium size, just because it is hard to maintain a truly democratic organization of a vast number of people. Democratic participation is easiest in face-to-face groups and becomes more difficult in large organizations. Measuring success. Okay, some case studies for worker cooperatives. All right. So let's go through each of these examples one by one. How long is this so far? We're at 24 minutes. This is going to be a long one. Sorry. I just want to get through this. All right. To arrive at a preliminary list of determinants of success of cooperatives, we examine a number of case studies below. The Rockdale Weavers. Let us begin with an example dating back to the 19th century. The striking flannel weavers, who formed a cooperative society in England in 1844, are best known for their role in initiating the modern consumer cooperative movement. The Rockdale Pioneers, as they called themselves, also founded a cooperative cotton mill that opened in 1854 with 100 workers putting up most of the capital. The cooperative version of the Rockdale Pioneers was extremely broad. They planned common housing, production cooperatives, common land for agriculture, and a self-governing cooperative commonwealth of members that was to coordinate production, distribution, education, and government. The cooperative mill was so successful that the pioneers decided to expand it. They built a new, larger mill in 1859. To obtain the necessary capital, they sold 1,000 shares. Many were bought by outsiders who soon held a majority of the shares. The interest of the outside shareholders and the mill workers were in conflict. Within 3 years, the shareholders transformed the business into a capitalist company. And this, I'm going to tell you right now from having read more of this, this is a recurring theme in reasons that cooperatives fail, or fail or stop being cooperatives, right? The selling of shares to people who aren't workers, and those shareholders then decide, hey, we don't like the fact that your workers have rights. We want your mill to make more stuff regardless of how your workers are treated. And then they turn it into a functionally capitalist company. Or not even functionally capitalist, just proper capitalist. The Pacific Northwest Plywood Co-ops. First lumber co-op was established in 1921 when a group of 125 workers invested $1,000 each to found Olympia Veneer. God, I have something in my throat. Sorry about that. Since then, about 30 cooperative plywood factories were established in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. All the 18 plants in existence in 1974 have been operating for over 20 years and one for 34 years. The output of the plywood co-ops accounted for about 12% of all U.S. production in 1974. Most of the workers are owners, but these co-ops also hire non-members to do some of the work. Berman says conditions were mildly favorable for the industry during the years many co-ops were formed. The main impetus for new co-op startups, however, was the positive example of the first few to develop. The co-op workers were often much more productive than their counterparts in capitalist companies, which Berman attributes to their democratic organizational form. Co-op members worked harder, wasted less, and required less supervision than those working in capitalist mills. In some plywood co-ops, all members were paid at the same rate. The co-ops were better able to survive under adverse conditions than other plywood firms, she says, because their members were willing to tighten their belts and accept temporary pay cuts or fewer hours during hard times. 1/3 of the plywood cooperatives went out of business by the mid-1980s. Some were apparently casualties of the market. Plywood manufacturers faced problems related to the uncertainty of raw material supply and the instability of demand related to the seasonal and cyclic nature of the industry. Other co-ops were sold to outside buyers precisely because they were so successful. Look at that. Hey, that thing that I said was going to show up again? Look, there it is. I found it. Berman terms this as the failure of success. Workers ready to retire discovered the value of their shares had jumped from an initial 1 to 2,000 to 25, 50, or even more. New young workers did not have the money to buy into the co-op, so retiring members found it easier to sell their shares to capitalist lumber companies that wanted to acquire their very profitable business. Have you noticed the pattern yet of worker co-ops being so successful that capitalists want in on them? It's a pattern. The Jamaican sugar worker co-ops. For another example, we turn to agricultural production cooperatives in Jamaica, where sugar workers obtained control of 23 cane farms during the 70s. Like a number of other conversions of former capitalist enterprises to a cooperative form, the cane farms were an example of, quote, lemon socialism. The three large sugar estates on which the farms were located have been owned by the United Fruit Company and a British sugar corporation, Tate & Lyle. When these transnational giants found that growing cane was no longer profitable, they willingly sold the land to the government. Meanwhile, activists from the Social Action Center launched an organizing campaign to transform the farms into worker cooperatives. On each farm, these sugar workers elected management committees to supervise the professional managers. Second-level co-ops were established to provide a unified voice for all the farms on each estate, and a central co-op in Kingston provided direction and voice for the entire system, as well as educational services to members. Workers faced numerous obstacles. They controlled the cane farms, but the factories that processed their cane remained in government hands. The agricultural machinery and irrigation systems they inherited with the business have been allowed to deteriorate. The continuing struggle between the sugar workers and the professional managers was also a problem. The Jamaican sugar plantations reflected the old caste and class dating back to slavery days. The sugar workers got low pay for very hard work. Many of the older workers were very illiterate. Often they were looked down upon by the managerial staff. The managers were holdovers from the earlier days of the transnationals. Many were unresponsive to the co-op idea, and some were hostile to it. So this is kind of the opposite of what happened up here. Is the transnationals had already been here, and the I don't want to say imposition, but the transition to a cooperative structure maybe wasn't properly incentivized, and it had some issues associated with it that made the managers unwilling to, well, cooperate. Despite the formidable difficulties they encountered, a number of the farms were more efficient under cooperative management than they had been under government or transnational corporation control. What finally killed the co-ops, however, was government opposition. After the Siga regime replaced Manley's party in office in 1980, it disbanded the cooperatives as part of a program of privatization. Ostensibly, this was because the cooperatives were losing money. The real reason was that the co-ops were seen as socialistic and as a symbol of the opposition party, a symbol that had to be destroyed. But, dude, that's crazy. Capitalists undoing a democratic worker co-op? I'm gonna cut that. You guys get the point at this point. Perhaps the most widely known contemporary worker co-ops are those in the Basque region of Spain, recently reorganized as the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. The MCC has 3 divisions: industrial production, retail distribution, and financial services. Together they provided jobs for 27,000 members by 1995. They are linked to a network that includes about 85 industrial co-ops, a cooperative bank, a social security system, a student cooperative, agricultural co-ops, housing and construction co-ops, and dozens of consumer co-op stores. A major strength of these cooperatives is that they are joined together in a functioning network. A key element of the network is the cooperative bank, which provides financing as well as technical assistance to help keep the incubation of new co-ops. So this is really interesting. It's, instead of being one big co-op, it is sort of an interconnected network of a bunch of different co-ops to kind of combat that issue that we saw in the plywood co-ops, where the shares jumped to just like unaffordable prices. And this helps to combat that by constantly allowing new co-ops to spring up here and there while others kind of continue to do their own things. Other strengths include the common Basque nationality, which helps promote solidarity, the emphasis of the Basque culture on the importance of savings, and the emphasis on education. There were only 9 business failures within this network over a period of almost 4 decades. So out of all of these co-ops, which we're looking at, 85 of them? Wait, no, even more than the 85, because there were the 85, the bank, and all of these other ones, and dozens of consumer co-op stores. Out of all of those, there were 9 failures. 9 co-ops that, I guess, failed to get off the ground or went bankrupt. 9. That's this many. In addition to developing an integrated network of mutual supporting organizations, the Mondragon system is significant in several other respects, according to Johnson and White. The Mondragon cooperatives solved the problem of lack of capital. They draw on private savings of the bank's 500,000 members. Also, member co-ops retain a reserve of 15 to 20% of profits. To this, they add internal capital accounts in the name of each member, in which another 70% of the profits are held. This gives the co-ops access to 85 to 90% of all profits for reinvestment until members cash in their internal capital accounts on retirement. We must add here that by 1995, the bank had accumulated so much capital that it was able to invest only 10% of its funds in loans to affiliated cooperatives. The bank's entrepreneurial, my brain is fried, I've worked 24 hours this weekend. The bank's entrepreneurial and planning division became a major force for local economic development. It was a proactive technical assistance organization that promoted the maximization of jobs rather than profits. Yes, good. Do more of that, please. The co-ops adopted a form of ownership that made it difficult for them to revert to private ownership. Instead of ownership based on individual shares, the cooperatives are owned by their working members as a whole. All members have one vote on key issues. Any decision to sell the co-op must be ratified by a 2/3 vote. All right, that's interesting. And this is like this is a big one. I mean, it's you can like Google it. They have a Wikipedia page. This is like the one that everyone like talks about, and it seems like it works. The O&O supermarkets in Philadelphia, with the help of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. I'm sorry if I'm shaking my webcam, by the way. It's propped up a little tenuously. With the help of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, 6 worker-owned supermarkets opened in the Philadelphia area during the 1980s. The O&O, worker-owned and operated. Oh, I know what that stands for now. Markets began after A&P closed most of its stores in the Delaware Valley and laid off 2,000 employees. The union bargained with A&P to reopen 50 markets as the Superfresh chain in exchange for wage concessions. At the same time, the union secured an option for its members to buy 2 former A&P locations. These became the Parkwood Manor and Russell Nona markets. Each employee invested $5,000 in the purchase, most of it borrowed from the employees' credit union. Union commissioned the technical assistance organization PACE of Philadelphia to provide education and training for the prospective worker owners. The O&O workers agreed to pay cuts with the incentive that later their pay would increase and that as owners they would share in future profits. Encouraged by the results of the first 2 O&O stores, PACE helped add 4 markets to the network. The markets flourished for several years, maintaining some 200 jobs that would otherwise have been lost. They demonstrated that worker control could lead to lower costs, and since all participants are union members, they showed that employee ownership and control is compatible with unionization. That's awesome. Unionization is also something that's based that I need to research more. Nevertheless, by 1989, 5 of the markets had been sold or were closed, and only Parkwood Manor remained. A number of factors may help explain this. They didn't have enough capital. In the retail food industry, competition is stiff, profit margins low, and modernization expensive. Worker solidarity was weak. Workers at Roslyn and Parkwood Manor developed a worker capitalist outlook. They were unwilling to accept new employees as full owners because that would have diminished their share of profits. These stores developed a 2-tier system of more privileged full-time worker owners and less privileged part-time employees who were not owners. This is why co-ops need to be kept small, because when you start adding these like tiers, these hierarchies within the co-op, it really kind of stops being a co-op. Optimistic sales projections led some markets to hire more workers that could be supported. I think it's supported by sales income. Capitalist corporations in such situations rarely hesitate to reduce labor costs, even if it means closing down units and laying off workers. Since a major purpose of worker co-ops is to create and maintain jobs, some O&O managers were reluctant to cut labor costs by laying off workers or reducing the hours each member worked. So, labor costs getting out of control. The O&O markets illustrate the vulnerability of small enterprises in a market economy dominated by big business, whose survival may be more a function of their access to capital than business efficiency. That's capitalism. Additionally, at least in the U.S., cultural values such as individualism and respect for wealth as transmitted through the mass media and the school systems tend to support capitalism. Those socialized to capitalist values may be prejudiced against cooperative principles. This helps explain why some cooperators don't see any problem with having more privileged worker owners and less privileged hired labor in the same organization. The merits and drawbacks of hiring non-member labor have led to long-standing debates within the kibbutz movement in Israel, as well as the Mondragon network. I don't know anything about this. Theoretical models. Okay. This part I haven't read. I don't want to just like read this whole thing word for word because that's probably boring for you. It's boring for me, and it's not terribly original on my part. Okay, so first, population ecology model or environmental factors cause organizations with appropriate characteristics to succeed and others to fail. Okay, the second, resource dependence, focuses on the dependence of organizations on their environment for the resources they need to sustain them. The common denominator in these models is the environment. There are at least 3 relatively identifiable levels of the environment with business organizations. Trade, traditional corporate forms or cooperatives must deal with. First is the mega environment, which consists of the technological, economic, legal, political, sociocultural, physical, and international components. The task environment, and the internal environment, its organizational structure and culture. Okay. Okay. this is all stuff I'm gonna have to read off camera. I'm going to read it, but it's probably stuff I'm gonna have to read off camera because this is a lot. Like, I really don't want to bore you any more than I already am in this 40-minute video, just going through and reading all of this. Oh my god, there's so much. Okay. I'll at least get to this one. I think I skimmed this part earlier. Organizational structure and other internal factors contribute to co-op survival. The failure of success, that's what we were talking about earlier. Co-ops may fail by transformation into capitalist businesses. Ones that use the capitalist stock model and want to expand, so going, public on the stock market and letting people who aren't workers buy stocks, which really seems to defeat the point of a co-op in the first place. But okay. Obvious remedy is to link control to membership in the organization and set up internal capital accounts for each worker, as in the Mondragon model. So Mondragon can't just get bought out by a capitalist firm because they have so much capital stockpiled, and all of that capital, access to that capital, is tied to membership in the organization. The main feature of these accounts is that they divide the membership aspect from the financial aspect. Each worker has one vote on issues affecting the company, such as electing the governing board. But each worker also has a separate internal capital account that reflects his or her initial cash investment and accrued interest, plus dividends voted over the years by the co-op, minus the worker's proportionate share of any business losses. Size. The only strike at Mondragon, the singular strike erupted at the largest factory, which with several thousand worker members, and some leaders of that network now believe size is best limited to 500. That's just like what we were talking about earlier. The more difficult for it to function democratically, like the bigger it gets. Management quality. Co-ops may fail because of poor management. Yeah, so do traditionally held firms. You need managers that know how to do their jobs. Capitalization. Savings and invest in business may cost begin with inadequate capital. Co-ops like the O&O markets may fail because they don't have enough of a cash cushion to ride out temporary reductions in income caused by market fluctuations or minor losses attributable to management mistakes. And solidarity. Co-ops need to develop in their members a sense of solidarity and mutual aid. Yeah, that's the article, and I'm going to go back and read all of these, and I might get back to you on that. But this video has been very long compared to some of my other stuff. I think longer than any other at this point. I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to call this here. This has been Worker Co-ops 101. What they are, why they are good, and why they're bad. No, not why they're bad. Why they fail. Those are different statements that mean different things. If you liked this video, like it, please. Dislike it if you didn't like it, and subscribe if you want to see more of these. I got a Twitter you can follow. I post there very irregularly. I have a Discord that you can join. There's like 8 of us in there now. It's a good time. You could be the 9th. And yeah. Yeah, take it easy.